Bill Browder, hedge fund managers are not normally targets of foreign governments, but you are. You're a target of Vladimir Putin, and you describe your ordeal in your book, Red Notice. Why is he out to get you?
Well, I was originally just a regular hedge fund manager. Then I discovered all the companies I was investing in were corrupt. I started to fight the corruption by exposing it. I was then expelled from the country, declared a threat to national security. My offices were raided. Police seized my companies, stole $230 million of taxes. My lawyer intervened, Sergei Magnitsky. He was arrested, tortured, and killed. And I've been fighting for justice ever since. And in that process, I got the U.S. Congress to impose sanctions on Russia for the first time in 35 years.
Let's step back a bit. Talk about when you first went over to Russia. What were you investing in? And then talk about how it all unfolded.
Well, I went to Russia originally in the early 1990s when they just left the Soviet Union. They went from communism to capitalism, and doing so, they gave away all the shares of all the companies for free. They traded at a tiny premium to free, which meant that they were still free when I was buying them. And so I could buy shares at a 99.7% discount on a comparable basis to like oil companies, on a comparable basis to BP, Exxon, and other such things. And so it was really a bet. If they allowed you to keep the stuff, then you'd make 10 or 20 times your money. And if they didn't, you'd lose it all.
So you did very well for a while. Then how did things turn sour, so sour that your lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, was tortured and then killed over what the government was trying to do to you?
So for a while, I was complaining about the corruption in the companies to try to get the share price up. I was basically an early version of a shareholder activist in a much more extreme situation than the Bill Ackmans and Dan Loebs of the world. And I was going after Gazprom and Sberbank and all the big Russian companies. And they tolerated that and even encouraged that at the time when Putin was fighting with the same guys I was fighting with. The problem was he arrested the richest man in Russia, Michael Khodorkovsky, in 2003 and put him on trial in 2004. And the result of that trial was all the other oligarchs coming to Putin and saying, what do we have to do to make sure that we don't sit in a cage like Khodorkovsky? And Putin said something very simple, 50%. And at that moment, Putin became the richest man in Russia and possibly one of the richest men in the world. And every time I complained about corruption, I wasn't going after his enemies, I was going after his own financial interests.
And then Sergei Magnitsky, he went and actually tried to even push this even further. He was tortured, he was killed, and then you pushed for the Magnitsky Act here in the U.S. Talk about that ordeal.
Sergei Magnitsky was my lawyer. He was 37 when he was killed in Russian police custody after being tortured for 358 days. When I got the news, it was like a knife going into my heart, and I made a vow that I was going to make sure to get justice for him. We couldn't get any justice in Russia. They covered up the whole crime. They even put him on trial 3 years after he died. And so it made sense to me to come try to get international justice. I came to Congress, and I said, the people who killed Sergei did so for money. They like to spend their money in America. They like to travel to America. We shouldn't let them do that. And this is one of the few pieces of legislation that had liberal Democrats and conservative Republicans all on the same page. When we put it up for a vote, when Congress put it up for a vote, it was 92-4 in the Senate, 89% of the House of Representatives. And the President signed it in December of 2012, and it was the first sanctions legislation against Russia in 35 years. Now, there's since been more based on the Magnitsky Act for Ukraine, but this was it.
Well, that's an encouraging conclusion to a clearly harrowing tale that still continues, but I want to take it from an investing perspective for this last question. What should investors do with emerging markets now that we know what happened in Russia? Should you invest in unstable dictatorships, even if the profit could be great for a while, because it could turn on you very quickly?
Well, my story is the most telling story, which is that I was the largest foreign portfolio investor in Russia. I was making a fortune. I was a big guy there, and they completely wiped me out. They killed my lawyer. They stole my companies. So what have I learned? So I made all my money in emerging markets, and today I have all of my money not in emerging markets. I got most of my money in North America, a little bit in Western Europe. I think people undervalue how important property rights and political stability are, and emerging markets need to trade at a much bigger discount to justify the kind of risks that one takes.
Bill Browder, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching The Street.